I used to think English was just another subject to pass at school, something to memorize before a test, something to forget after. I never cared about it, and honestly, I didn't think I needed it. I wasn't planning to move abroad. I didn't dream of working at an international company. And the idea of watching a movie without subtitles didn't feel like an accomplishment. It just felt unnecessary. But things started to shift the day I failed my third job interview. It wasn't that I didn't have the skills. I had them. I had the experience, the drive, the work ethic. But every time the interviewer switched to English, I froze. My sentences collapsed before they even left my mouth. My grammar disappeared. My vocabulary shrank to 5 basic words. And worst of all, I started sweating like I was being interrogated by the police. The last interviewer looked at me with pity in his eyes. He said, "You seem capable, but communication matters." And then he thanked me for coming. That night I walked home in silence, not because I wanted to reflect, but because I was ashamed. I was a grown man, and I couldn't say simple things about myself in a language spoken by over 1 billion people. I didn't sleep much. I kept replaying the interview in my head, trying to fix my answers in English, pretending I had said something better. I told myself I wasn't stupid. I told myself I could improve. But deep down, I knew I had wasted too many years thinking English was just for other people. And that's when it hit me. If I didn't fix this, I would keep losing. Not just jobs, but chances, confidence, freedom. The next morning I opened my laptop and typed one sentence into Google. How to learn English, for real. I didn't want shortcuts. I didn't want 10 tips to learn fast. I wanted a process that worked. After scrolling through a sea of clickbait and useless advice, I found a short blog post. It was written by someone who had learned English after the age of 30. His writing wasn't fancy, but his message was clear. Don't study English like a subject. Live it like a language. That one line stayed in my head for hours. I didn't fully understand it at first. I had always studied English with notebooks, lists, and grammar exercises. But what did it mean to live it? Or I kept reading. The writer described how he had changed the language on his phone, watched every YouTube video with English subtitles, and repeated native speakers' sentences out loud every single day, like shadowing them. He even spoke to himself in English while doing basic tasks around the house. It sounded weird. Honestly, it sounded a little obsessive. But I had nothing to lose. That night, I changed the language on my phone and laptop. I unsubscribed from every channel in my language and started following only English-speaking creators. I opened Netflix, searched for an English comedy show with subtitles, and made a rule: no switching back. It was frustrating. I didn't understand half of what they were saying. I paused constantly. I rewound scenes. I kept checking new words. But after 20 minutes of that episode, something strange happened. I wanted to keep going. That was day 1. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I didn't want opinions. I didn't need motivation quotes. I just needed to prove something to myself. I started talking to myself in English in the morning, nothing complicated. Just simple stuff like, I'm brushing my teeth. I'm making coffee. I'm leaving for work. I felt ridiculous at first, but I remembered what the blog said. English isn't something you visit once a week. It's a place you move into. And so I moved in. The first few weeks were hell. Not because English was too hard, but because my ego was too fragile. I wasn't used to feeling like an idiot every day. I was used to being confident, used to explaining things clearly, making people laugh, speaking fast. But now, whenever I opened my mouth in English, even when I was just practicing alone, I sounded like a child who had forgotten how to think. I stuttered. I repeated the same verbs over and over. And worst of all, I avoided anything that required speaking aloud. I kept telling myself I would just focus on listening for now. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was scared of my own voice, so I did something small, something I thought would be easy. I started watching videos about daily routines in English. Things like how to make breakfast or my morning routine. These weren't exciting, but they were exactly what I needed. Clear pronunciation, slow speaking, simple vocabulary. Every time I heard a sentence that felt natural, I paused the video and repeated it out loud. Not once, 5 times, 10 times. I tried to copy every sound, every rise and fall in their voice, every pause. It felt awkward. It felt like acting. But that's when it clicked. Learning English is not academic. It's performance. One night I watched a video called How to Shadow for Fluency. The teacher said something that punched me in the chest. If you're too proud to sound stupid, you're too proud to improve. I rewound that sentence 3 times. If you're too proud to sound stupid, you're too proud to improve. He was right. That night I tried full shadowing for the first time. I played a 3-minute video where a man was talking about his favorite hobbies. I listened to each sentence, then repeated it right after, mimicking his speed, tone, everything. I didn't stop to translate. I didn't write anything down. I just followed his voice like an echo. After 2 minutes, my throat hurt. After 3, my brain felt like it was sweating. I checked the mirror. My face looked serious, too serious. I realized I was concentrating so hard I hadn't blinked in a while. I laughed, out loud, in English. It was a small laugh, but it felt good. It felt real. From that day on, shadowing became my daily workout. I treated it like lifting weights. At first, I could only handle short videos with clear speech. But slowly, I moved up to faster content. TED Talks, podcasts, even movie scenes. I still didn't understand everything, but I didn't panic anymore. I just followed, again and again. Each time I finished a session, I felt like I had fought through something, like I had won a small battle. And over time, I started noticing changes. My tongue moved faster. I didn't hesitate before saying simple things. I started thinking in English, not all the time, but in short bursts. I would look at my coffee and think, this is strong. I'd walk past a stranger and think, he looks tired. I even started narrating my day in my head. Let's clean the kitchen. Let's focus now. Don't waste time. I wasn't translating anymore. I was speaking to myself in English. Then came the first real test. I was standing in line at a coffee shop when a foreign couple entered. They looked around, a bit confused, and then the man walked over to me and asked, "Excuse me, do you know if there's Wi-Fi here?" My heart jumped. Everything inside me said, "Just say no, smile, walk away." But I forced my mouth to move. I said, "Yes, they do. You just have to ask for the password at the counter." The words came out slowly but clearly. He smiled. "Oh, great. Thanks, man." I nodded. "No problem." 2 sentences. That was it. But it was the first time I had spoken real English to a real person. And they had understood me, not because I was perfect, but because I was clear. I walked out of that cafe feeling like I had just climbed a small mountain. No one around me noticed. But inside, I was celebrating. Because for the first time, English didn't feel like something I was studying. It felt like something I could use. After the cafe moment, I couldn't stop thinking about how it felt. Just 2 short sentences, but they came from me, not from a script, not from a textbook. And they worked. I didn't care that I spoke slowly. I didn't care that my accent wasn't perfect. What mattered was that I had made a real connection in English. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was nervous, but because my brain wouldn't shut up. It kept replaying the conversation. "Yes, they do. You just have to ask for the password." I said it out loud again in the dark, like testing my own voice. It sounded natural. That was when I realized something important. If I wanted to make real progress, I had to stop being a student of English. I had to become a user of English. So the next morning, I began a new habit. I called it conscious thinking. Every time I caught myself thinking in my native language, I switched. It didn't matter what I was thinking about. It could be what I was cooking, how I was feeling, or what I planned to do that day. I forced myself to say it in English. "I should drink more water. This pan is way too hot. I need to reply to my emails before lunch." At first, the sentences were basic. I repeated the same structures a lot. I wasn't trying to be poetic. I just wanted my brain to stop translating. I wanted it to go straight to English like it did with my first language. The first few days were weird. I felt like a narrator in my own life. But after a week, it became addictive. English stopped being a task. It became a constant presence, like background music, like a second voice in my head that slowly got louder and more confident. Then came the moment I leveled up. One afternoon, I was cooking pasta and realized I was arguing with myself in English. "Why did you put in that much salt?" "Because I wasn't paying attention." "Well, now it's ruined." I stopped mid-stir and actually laughed. Because that was it. That was the moment I understood. If you can argue with yourself in English, you're no longer memorizing the language. You're living in it. So I pushed it further. I started talking to myself on walks. I described the weather, commented on buildings, made mental observations about strangers passing by. Sometimes I whispered. Sometimes I just moved my lips without sound. Once, a guy on the train gave me a strange look. I smiled and kept going. Because I didn't care anymore. I wasn't doing it to impress anyone. I wasn't performing. I was rewiring my brain, and I knew it was working. But I didn't stop there. I created imaginary conversations. Hi, I'm Alex. Nice to meet you. Oh, where are you from? I'm from Vietnam, but I've been working on my English for about 6 months now. At first, I borrowed sentences I had heard from videos or podcasts. I copied the tone, the rhythm, the way native speakers paused between thoughts. Over time, I started creating my own answers. I practiced job interviews in my head. I pretended I was traveling abroad. I even imagined podcasts where I was the guest, talking about my journey, giving advice to beginners, sharing what had helped me. It was just me. No camera, no microphone, no audience, but it was real practice. And it made me feel like English wasn't just a goal anymore. It was part of who I was becoming. Something changed in my confidence, too. I no longer panicked when I saw English content online. I clicked on articles even if they looked complicated. I played YouTube videos without subtitles just to see how much I could catch. Sometimes I understood 80%, sometimes only 30%, but I didn't feel stupid. I felt curious. Instead of asking, "Why don't I understand this?" I asked, "What new things can I catch from this today?" That mindset was everything. By the end of that month, I noticed something that surprised me. I hadn't studied grammar at all. No exercises, no worksheets, but my grammar was getting better. I used the present perfect without thinking. I made comparisons naturally. I started using phrases like, "as far as I know," "to be honest," and "it depends." Not because I memorized them, but because I had heard them 100 times in real use. I wasn't learning from rules anymore. I was learning from rhythm, repetition, and real context. And for the first time since I started this journey, I felt fluent. Not in the academic sense, but in the way that mattered most. I could think, talk, and feel in English, even when no one was listening. It was a Saturday afternoon when it happened. I wasn't planning anything special. I just wanted a quiet place to sit, read a bit, maybe practice shadowing with my headphones. So I went to a small coffee shop in the city center, the kind that plays soft music and serves drinks with names I can never pronounce correctly. The place was half empty. I found a seat near the window, ordered a black coffee, and pulled out my earbuds. I was just about to hit play on a podcast when someone approached my table. It was a guy in his early 30s, maybe older, with a backpack and a slightly tired face. He smiled politely. "Hey, sorry to bother you. Do you mind if I sit here? The other tables are kind of packed." I froze for a second. Not because I didn't understand him, but because I did. Perfectly. I nodded. "Sure. Go ahead." He sat down and thanked me, then pulled out a book. For a few minutes we sat in silence. I kept pretending to listen to my podcast, but my mind wasn't really focused. Something inside me was pulling, nudging me toward something new. A thought I hadn't allowed myself to believe until that moment. You could talk to him. Like, actually talk. It scared me, but it also excited me. So I took a breath, removed my earbuds, and said, "That's a good book." He looked up, surprised, and smiled. "Yeah? You've read it?" "Not yet," I replied, "but I've heard a lot about it. It's been on my list." He laughed. "Same here. I've owned this for over a year. Just now getting to it." And that was it. No grammar drills, no prepared dialogue. Just two people talking about a book. We ended up chatting for nearly 45 minutes. We talked about books, about travel, about the city, even about the weather, which, to be fair, was pretty bad that day. He was from Canada, visiting for work, and had been traveling across Asia for 2 months. I told him a little about my job and how I was learning English to open new doors. At one point, I said something I hadn't planned, something I hadn't rehearsed. To be honest, I used to be afraid of conversations like this. He raised an eyebrow. "Really? Your English is great, man." I shook my head. "Not great, but better than before." He smiled again. "Well, you're doing something right." And just like that, something inside me shifted. Because he didn't slow down to talk to me. He didn't simplify his sentences. He didn't treat me like a student. He spoke to me like an equal. And I kept up. Sure, I made a few mistakes. I forgot a word or two. My tenses weren't always perfect. But I held the conversation. I responded. I asked questions. I followed his stories without translating in my head. That conversation wasn't an exam. It was proof. When he left, I stayed in the cafe for a while, just staring at my coffee. It had gone cold, but I didn't care. Because I realized something powerful. All those hours of talking to myself, all those quiet mornings, repeating after videos, all the simple phrases I had whispered in my kitchen. They weren't useless. They were training, not for a test, but for this, for real life, for real people, for real connection. That evening, I went home and opened my notebook. Instead of writing vocabulary or grammar rules, I wrote one sentence in bold letters. Today, I spoke English with confidence, and the world didn't end. I laughed as I wrote it, but I meant every word. After that day, something changed in the way I saw myself. I stopped thinking of English as the language I was learning. Instead, I started thinking of it as the language I use. It didn't mean I was perfect, but it meant I no longer needed to be. 2 months after the cafe conversation, I hit a wall. It didn't happen suddenly. It wasn't dramatic. It crept in slowly, like fog rolling over a quiet street. One day, I just didn't feel like doing my daily shadowing. The next day, I skipped reading. Then I went a whole weekend without listening to a single word of English. At first, I told myself it was just a short break, that I deserved it, that I had worked hard and needed to rest. But then, a few days off became a week, then 10 days. And then guilt kicked in. I started opening videos again, but not watching them. I clicked play, stared at the screen, then closed the tab. I kept a book on my desk, just so it looked like I was still studying. But I wasn't. I was stuck. The worst part? I didn't understand why. I had already proven to myself that I could hold a conversation. I had seen progress. People had complimented my speaking. I had done the hard part, breaking through the fear. But now, when things should have felt easier, I felt nothing. No fire, no hunger. It was like climbing a mountain, reaching a beautiful view, and then realizing there's another mountain behind it, and another, and another. Suddenly, all my progress felt small again. What's the point of all this? I asked myself. I didn't need English to survive. No one was forcing me to learn. It wasn't part of my job. I wasn't living abroad. So why was I pushing so hard? And that question haunted me. One evening I sat alone in my apartment, lights off, phone on silent. I pulled out my old notebook, the one I had used to track my early progress. I flipped through the pages, past messy word lists, motivational quotes, and little notes I had written to myself during the first few months. And then I found a page that stopped me. It was a journal entry from my 3rd week. Today, I couldn't say a single full sentence, but I still tried, because someday I'll look back and be glad I didn't quit. I stared at that sentence for a long time. That version of me didn't care about perfection. He didn't care about being fluent. He was proud just for trying. That guy wasn't burnt out. He was hungry. I missed being that guy. So the next morning I made a decision. No more guilt. No more pressure. No more trying to impress anyone, including myself. I went back to the basics. I picked a short, funny video, one I had already watched before, and did 5 minutes of shadowing. Just 5. I didn't force myself to do more. I didn't chase momentum. I just finished 5 quiet minutes of honest practice. Then I closed my laptop. That was enough. The day after that, I read 1 page of a book I liked. Not a grammar book. Not a guide to phrasal verbs. Just a story that made me smile. I didn't underline anything. I didn't open a dictionary. I just read it for fun. Little by little, the fire came back, but not the same fire I had before, not the intense, obsessive, prove myself every day kind of fire. This fire was slower, warmer, wiser. I stopped chasing fluency. I stopped worrying about whether I was better than last week. I just returned to the reason I started. I didn't want to be afraid anymore. And you know what? That reason was still strong enough. A week later, I found myself back at the same coffee shop. Another foreigner walked in, clearly lost, clearly confused. He looked around, then approached the counter. The barista didn't understand him. So I stood up, walked over, and said, "Hey, if you need help ordering, I can translate." The man looked relieved. "Seriously? That'd be great." I helped him order. We chatted for a few minutes. I didn't stumble. I didn't freeze. I didn't even think about it. When I left that cafe, I didn't feel victorious. I just felt calm. Because I knew something now. English wasn't something I was chasing anymore. It was something I carried. And no matter how many breaks I took, no matter how stuck I felt at times, it was mine. After climbing out of that low point, something changed in me. Not instantly, but permanently. I no longer studied English with fear. I no longer practiced with pressure. Instead, I used it the way people use a mirror, not to impress others, but to reflect on myself. I began writing short journal entries in English every evening. At first, the sentences were simple, direct, even awkward, but I didn't care. I wasn't writing for grammar points or to sound clever. I was writing to empty my thoughts in another language. Today was quiet. I didn't talk to many people, but I did a good job staying focused. I'm still afraid of speaking sometimes, but it's less than before. I want to be able to express my opinions without translating them. That last sentence hit me. It made me realize how much of my personality had been locked out by language. In my native language, I could be sarcastic. I could defend my views. I could make jokes. But in English, I had always felt like a simplified version of myself, like a polite robot. But something was starting to change, because the more I thought in English, the more I started to feel in English too. I would walk down the street, and my inner voice would say things like, "That sky looks dramatic. I don't like the energy in this place. You've done enough for today. Go home." I wasn't translating anymore. I was processing directly in English. At work, I started writing emails in English, even when they didn't need to be. I corrected the grammar of memes in my head. I caught myself muttering English phrases under my breath when I dropped something or got annoyed. Come on! Seriously? You've got to be kidding me. These weren't phrases I studied. They were phrases I absorbed. And I noticed something even more surprising. I began to dream in English. The first time it happened, it was weird. I was walking through an airport in my dream, and someone asked me where Gate 14 was. I responded, "Take a right, then go straight. It should be just past the bookstore." When I woke up, I wasn't sure if it had really happened, so I wrote it down in my notebook. A full sentence. No hesitation. No broken grammar. The next time the dream was longer. I was in a restaurant, having a full conversation with someone about a dish I couldn't pronounce. And the strangest thing? The English in my dream wasn't perfect. It was messy, just like real life, but it felt natural. And that was the moment I knew. The language had left the textbook. It had entered my subconscious. I also started talking to my future self in English. Whenever I felt tired or frustrated, I would look in the mirror and say, "You've already made it this far. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to keep showing up." Sometimes I wrote these messages down. Sometimes I whispered them. But the point was the same. I was no longer learning English just to speak with others. I was learning it to connect with myself at a deeper level. And then came a day I'll never forget. I was walking in a park when I heard two tourists arguing. They were lost, and one of them looked completely panicked. The other was checking a map, muttering something about missing a train. Without thinking, I stepped forward. "Hey, sorry, are you guys looking for the station?" They both turned to me. One nodded. "Yeah, we're trying to get to the airport express, but everything's in another language." I smiled. "It's actually not far. I can walk you to the entrance if you've got 2 minutes." And I did. We chatted along the way. Nothing fancy, just light conversation. They thanked me, told me I had excellent English, and asked where I was from. And for the first time ever, I didn't feel the need to explain that I was still learning. I just said, "Here, I'm local." "Well," the guy said, "your English sounds international." I laughed. "Thanks. It's been a journey." When I walked away from the station, I wasn't smiling because of their compliment. I was smiling because I didn't feel like a language learner anymore. I felt like a language owner. 1 year. It's been exactly 12 months since I changed the language on my phone, opened that first awkward video, and whispered my first hesitant sentence to myself in English. I still remember it. I want to learn English. It was short. It was clumsy. It wasn't even a full sentence. But it was real. It was honest. And it was the beginning. Now, 1 year later, I can say this out loud, confidently, without blinking. I learned English. Not perfectly, not completely, but I made it part of who I am. So what changed? It wasn't just the vocabulary, though I've learned hundreds of new words. It wasn't just the grammar, though my sentences flow better than ever. It wasn't even the speaking, though I can now have full conversations with people I used to avoid out of fear. No, what changed most was how I see myself. A year ago, I saw English as a wall, something that separated me from opportunity, from connection, from freedom. I saw English as a test I would probably fail. I saw people who spoke English as smarter, faster, more confident. I put myself below them, like I didn't belong in the same room. But I was wrong. English was never the wall. My fear was, my hesitation, my silence, my belief that I wasn't the kind of person who could learn a second language. Those were the real barriers. So I did the only thing that works. I stopped waiting to feel ready. I stopped waiting for perfect pronunciation. I stopped waiting for motivation, for approval, for someone to say, "Now you may begin." And I just started, quietly, clumsily, privately. I studied. I listened. I spoke. Sometimes I failed. Sometimes I doubted everything. Sometimes I wanted to quit. But I didn't, because deep down, I had made a decision. I was done with fear. And now, after 12 months, I want to leave something for you, who might be just starting, you, who might be afraid to speak, afraid to sound stupid, you, who have told yourself too many times that you're too old, too late, too busy, too weak. Let me say this clearly. You are not too anything. If you can say one sentence today, say it. If you can only understand 30% of a video, watch it anyway. If you can only speak to yourself in the mirror, then do that. Because that's how it starts. That's how it always starts. You don't need to sound like a native speaker. You don't need to memorize 1,000 rules. You don't need perfect grammar to have a voice. You just need to begin. And then begin again, and again. Because one day, without warning, you'll catch yourself doing it. You'll be walking through a store, or scrolling on your phone, or brushing your teeth, and your brain will speak to you in English, not to impress anyone, not to pass a test, just because it feels normal. And that moment, that's your freedom. Not fluency. Freedom. The ability to think, to speak, to feel, to exist in another language, without fear. I don't know if I'll ever be done learning English. Probably not. There's always more to explore, more to absorb, more to sharpen. But I'm no longer chasing something far away. I'm walking in it, living in it. And I know this now without doubt. Language is not a subject. It's a life. And it's yours, if you choose it. So if you're still on the fence, still wondering if this is worth it, let me tell you one last thing. This journey will change you. Not just your words. It will humble you. It will frustrate you. But it will also open doors you never knew existed. And one day, someone will look at you and say, "Your English is great," and you'll smile. Not because they complimented you, but because deep down you'll know you earned every single word.